Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Hyperconscious Podcast. Alan, what is hyperconscious?
Once you understand why something is the way that it is, now you have the power to change it. Great conversations with great people and great questions are the keys to the kingdom of unlocking your consciousness.
Every single action that you do starts as a thought. When you control the way you think, you will control the way you act, and you will control the way you live. That is hyperconscious. Ladies and gentlemen, the Hyperconscious Podcast is proudly sponsored by our friend and mentor, David Meltzer of the Playbook Podcast. He was kind enough to join us on episode 144 and 135.
Folks, it has become Kevin and I's mission in life to help you realize that the life of your dreams is right on the other side of you becoming the greatest version of yourself. Let us help you do that.
I rarely do these things twice in such a short amount of time, but you guys impress me. I believe in people that provide value and of our service. You two guys are on your way to huge fulfillment, purpose, and profitability, and I look forward to helping you both.
We appreciate that more than you know. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another very special, as always, episode of the Hyperconscious Podcast. We hope you enjoyed our latest episode. We did a 5-minute clinic on the word clarity and how getting clear on what you want out of life will help you so very much. Today, for episode number 236, we're getting up there, we are going to do a small talks episode on self-care.
It's good to be back in the studio.
It is. It feels like it's been a long time.
Doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. It does.
That's because we spent the week prior doing 8 podcasts in 7 days.
Correct. That is correct.
That is correct. Okay, so before we jump into this episode, you know what I'm going to ask you. I'm going to ask you to go to the hyperconsciouspodcast.com, click on join, #HyperConsciousNation. Folks, Kevin and I have been more consistent in that group. You posted recently.
Yeah. Man, that's still, I was thinking about that today. Like, God, we are the worst.
I posted last night. As a matter of fact, that will be the dramatic reading on the Scratching the Surface episode. But if you go there, you will be a part of a like-minded community that are all chasing goals and dreams, living for a greater purpose, living for a mission, and who all are designing a life on their own terms. Join that.
I was telling Alan this on the ride down here to the studio today. I had this moment where I was thinking of where I would be 2 years ago and how much different, like how different my life would be, how it would look. I would probably be in New Jersey right now, crawling around in an attic or doing something. And the only reason...
Dead birds,
dead spiders, dead everything. The only reason I'm where I am is because of this podcast, because of the avatar that you see behind me if you're watching this on YouTube. And it's crazy how much it's evolved, but not only that, it's also crazy how much it has forced me as a human being to evolve. And I said wasn't supposed to say
We have written down no ums.
No ums. We're trying to become better speakers.
Fact.
But again, that's all because of this podcast. So if you're looking to start a podcast, I want to help you. I think it's probably one of the things I'm most passionate about. I don't like the shortcuts. I want to be the best in the world at this. That's why we're trying to say no ums. But I want to help people start their own podcast because I think everybody has a message that they can get across. And when you tell your message and you're authentic and you're real and you're true and you're vulnerable, that's how you build a community. And we're very lucky now that we have a community. We have a team, people that are with us, helping us, working with us because of who we are as people and what we want out of life. So I just wanted to bring that.
A couple things I want to say quickly. One is I've watched Kevin for the last 2.5 years grow and evolve. Shout out to Anthony Trucks and his speech. He said, what you create creates you. And I can tell you from an outside perspective, watching him grow and evolve, and then also being a part of it in terms of this podcast, like, it has forced us to become better human beings than we ever could have fathomed.
Yeah.
And it still continues to do that. And, no ums. Wow.
It's hard.
It is hard. One of the other things I wanted to say, too, is if you do work with Kevin, you're also working with David Meltzer. So we have a mentor and a coach who's far ahead of us in this podcast arena and in terms of speaking as well. So you're not only going to get access to Kevin, but you're also going to get access to some of the help from me and some of the help and teachings that we get from Dave.
I just want the takeaway to be the fact that this is probably the thing I'm most passionate about. And I know a lot of things when it comes to podcasting, but I also want to make sure that at the end of the day, we always do what's best for you and what's in your heart. And I just want to give you the knowledge and the experience that I've gained to help you. I'm very heartfelt when it comes to that. Podcasting is my thing. I want to be the best in the world, and I want to help you be the best you. Okay.
Speaking of that, should we podcast?
Yeah, we should probably podcast.
All right, so today's episode is Small Talks on Self-Care.
Wow.
I looked this up earlier. I looked it up on Google, and there's 2 definitions that I think are very relevant. Number 1, the practice of taking action to preserve or improve one's own health. As a fitness coach, I love that one. See my 5 pillars. Kidding.
Wow.
Okay, second definition. The practice of taking an active role in protecting one's own well-being and happiness, in particular during periods of stress. So my first question, I set the intention before this episode to say, okay, Alan, I want you to extrapolate value from Kevin for the listeners. So my first question for Kevin is, why did you choose self-care for this episode, and what do you hope they take away?
I think coming off of a trip like we had in California,
Oh, yeah.
one of my focuses when I got home was to make sure that I practiced self-care. And one of the hardest, this is something that, so we're going to be doing an episode on anxiety next week if you're listening to this. So next Monday will be a 5-minute clinic on anxiety. But after the Brendan Burchard event, High Performance Academy, when I got home, I was anxiety-ridden. And I didn't...
You mean influencer or
No.
HPA?
HPA.
Oh, okay. So
HPA.
2018?
Yeah.
Got it.
When I got home, I felt like a different human being. I was anxious all the time. I thought I was sick. I couldn't breathe. And I went hard into self-care. And the problem is, I don't know that I actually needed the level of self-care that I gave myself. So one of the things that I tell my clients, and I know you tell your clients, that I think differentiates us from a lot of people is some days you just have to be. When you're overwhelmed, I don't want you to do more work. I'm not going to tell you to grind through and do more work.
Right.
I'm going to tell you, and I know Alan's going to tell you, to seek self-care,
Right.
to seek comfort, because you will burn down if you just keep fighting through it all the time. And that's one of the reasons that people see us and they see 8 podcasts in 7 days, 6 gym sessions, a Brendan Burchard event, 12 hours of driving,
Right.
a red-eye home, and then more work. But I also want to make sure that I'm pulling back the curtain on the fact that when I'm burning down, I seek self-care. I'll watch 4 hours of UFC. I'll watch a movie. When I'm with Taryn, I'm watching a movie or I'm getting self-care. That fills me up. So my definition of self-care is just something that fills your bucket. It doesn't have to be quiet time necessarily. Maybe it's time with family or friends, but make sure you're getting your bucket filled so you can fill other people's buckets as well.
I had a little mini breakthrough. So not only do I agree with everything you just said, and yes, I do say that to my clients. It's funny, one of my clients said, after that trip, what you need to do is go put sleeping pills into Kevin's ice cream so that he actually takes self-care, which I thought was hilarious.
I
by
dig
the way.
that. I dig
She cares about you.
I appreciate you.
So one of the things... okay. So one of the things that I wanted to say was self-care, something that fills your cup. Have you ever been to like a party or a social gathering where you actually felt drained after?
Everyone.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
So that is not R&R.
No.
That is a distinction that I had to make for myself. Like, just because you're not working, Alan, does not mean you're filling your cup.
I'm going to be very real. Taryn and I went to our good friend Wally's wedding. Shout out to Wally and Vicky.
Right.
Congratulations. I was so anxious before. That's not fun for me. That's not R&R. That's actually work.
Right.
And I don't think a lot of people... Make sure you know yourself. Make sure you know yourself and think to yourself, what am I actually getting out of this? Is this something that I would do for fun? Is this something that I'm going to feel more energized after? Or is this going to be a drain on my energy? It doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but it means you should plan self-care before, after, sometime. Consider it. Consider where you're going to put it at least.
100%.
Yeah.
So...
6 minutes and 55 seconds on the clock. Hammering because we were talking in the beginning for a minute.
Another question for Kevin. So what are 3 to 5 things that you do that does fill your cup specifically?
Spending time with Taryn is huge. The gym fills my cup. That's why I start every single day with it. UFC. People think I'm crazy because I'll watch 5 or 6 hours of UFC, but UFC is my football. I love watching it. It fills me up. It's something that I'm very passionate about, and it's also something that I want to practice. So it's not just something that I like watching, but I also like doing.
Can't wait for your first fight, man.
I know.
It's gonna be fun.
I'm gonna start training first.
Yeah,
that would be helpful.
Well, it's in the future. In the future. So that's what else?
Writing, music, self-care for me. That's 4.
We have another one.
You want another one? Self-care.
Anything.
Just being in bed by myself.
Right.
Getting solo time doesn't happen very often for me. So when I can get a day to myself, after I hammer out my work, I'll take a couple hours and I'll just be. And just throw something on the television, but I'm not necessarily watching it. Sometimes I'm just laying there and just being.
Right.
Yeah, that helps.
Oh, yeah. So one of the other things, too, is just because... So David Meltzer talks about the comfort zone, the learning zone, and the anxiety zone.
Yes.
And if you're in the anxiety zone, you need to be aware of it, know yourself, and then seek self-care. If you're in the comfort zone, you need to seek challenge. You don't need more comfort. So let's say someone's out there and they're in the anxiety zone. They need to seek self-care. But your ability to do that is predicated on 2 things. Your awareness of whether or not you're actually in the anxiety zone. And then number 2, how aware you are of what actually fills your cup.
Yeah.
Right?
Is there a question? I don't know if that was a question.
No, it wasn't. It was just a
I
statement.
think for a lot of people, that's why my takeaway for this episode, and you asked what my intention was before we started, I want you, if you're watching this or if you're listening to this, to get crystal clear on when you actually seek self-care. Because what a lot of people talk about is grind. And we talk about that because that's what we do. But we've also leveled up to this point where we can travel, hop off a 6-hour flight, go podcast, go to the gym, and rinse and repeat. I wasn't always able to do that. And don't forget, I used to travel every single week. I did that for years. I used to drive 6 hours to work. I used to work 8 hours, and then Friday I would work 8 hours and drive 6 hours home. So we have both leveled up to this. So when you hear my take on self-care, maybe I only take an hour a day. Maybe you need more self-care than I do. There's a good chance you probably do. But I think the takeaway I want to leave you with is make sure you're not using self-care as an excuse not to do your work. There is that fine line.
Right.
Make sure you're unbelievably aware of, okay, I'm milking this now. I don't actually need this. I'm just being lazy, because there's that fine line.
I know that moment.
There's that fine line.
Yeah.
I don't want somebody to leave this episode and say, wow, I need to work harder. Maybe you do. There's a good chance you do. But there's also a good chance that you're not giving yourself the proper amount of self-care.
So I think there's 2 key philosophies here. Some people subconsciously have a goal to rest and relax.
Yes.
That's the objective. For Kevin and I, this is pulling back the curtain. I really want to be very open and transparent about this. My objective is almost never to actually relax. I relax in an effort to be more productive. Most people are focusing on how do I get more relax time. I only use relax time as a tool to make sure I can maximize productivity. And I think that's a huge distinction. So you have person A and person B. Person A, their objective is to hang out, have fun, and relax. And there's nothing wrong with that, but you need to know yourself and pick which one you want and understand the results that come with each. So for me, rest and relaxation is a necessity to maximize productivity. Some people stay as productive as they can so that they can maximize rest and relaxation. Understand which end you're on, and most likely which end you're on is going to determine whether or not you need more self-care or more work ethic.
I think it's just a huge thing for people that getting crystal clear on what it actually is probably the best takeaway, because if you're scrolling through social media for an hour, that's not self-care.
Oh, no.
Especially if you have any sort of comparison problem where you're comparing yourself to other people on social media. That is actually quite the opposite. That's probably draining you of your energy. So I would challenge you, if you're watching this or listening, to start trying different things to see if they fill your cup, because a lot of the habits we have, we do because they're normal. It doesn't necessarily mean they're the best for us.
I have a question for you. So what is an example?
Slide over to me a little bit.
Yeah?
Yeah, you're not really... There you go. That way I don't have to edit this.
I don't want us to touch knees.
We're going to have to touch knees.
So
slide on over.
What is something that you used to think was self-care that was
smoking weed?
That was actually, wow, jumped right into it. A couple examples of old Kevin, what he thought was self-care versus what you now know kind of wasn't. It was actually draining your cup. For me, it was partying for sure.
Yeah.
Like I used to think that was what
Yeah, I think for me it was just I've always struggled to party because it's the social anxiety aspect of it makes me more tired.
Crippling
Crippling social anxiety that I have.
Right.
When I used to get home from work, I would smoke weed and play video games. Because I thought, and don't get me wrong, I'll still play Call of Duty every once in a while. I don't partake in the devil's lettuce anymore.
The devil's lettuce.
I think as you evolve and as you grow, you'll realize that your self-care will too.
Has to.
Your self-care will too. And just get crystal clear on how you feel after you do certain things. If you don't feel more refreshed, if you feel emptier after you do something, that is not self-care. That is actually draining you. And if you continue to do that, you're always going to wonder why you keep getting burned out.
And it's actually not productive. Like if you are low on sleep, low on nutrition, overwhelmed, anxious, you're not going to be productive until you seek self-care.
Yeah.
So you need to go take a break and find self-care to get back to a whole place where you can actually be productive again.
I think this is a rare episode where Alan and I are telling you to do less. But
right.
I
It does
do
feel
think
weird, doesn't it?
It does feel a little weird. I think the challenge is, and the responsibility is on you if you're watching or listening. Don't take this as, well, that means what I'm doing is enough. Maybe it's not.
Right.
But make sure you're not giving yourself an easy out, but make sure you're also not being unbelievably hard on yourself and burning yourself into the ground. Alan and I know that from experience, and that's why we're sharing this with you.
0 to 10. If you're at a 10, you're in the anxiety zone and you're overwhelmed, then you need to seek self-care to get back to a 5. It's a drive to 5. If you're a 0, you're in the comfort zone.
Some would say.
Which means you need more challenge. You need to be more productive. You're milking it. So I think we all need to drive to 5. 10-second blip.
10-second blip. My goodness. My goodness. My goodness.
I
didn't say it. I think I said it once.
I said it way too many times.
Cognizant of it. Okay. Lori Harder said something along the lines of this, and I'm going to butcher it. A bunch of 80% days or 60% days. Was it 80?
60.
A bunch of 60% days are better than a 100% day and then a 0% day. What am I saying? I would rather you take 2 hours of self-care every single night than have to take a week off, because you're going to get way more done consistently if every day you take a little bit of time for yourself rather than burning down and then having to go back to the drawing board.
Absolute fire. And if you do consistent 60% days, eventually that's going to be 61, 62, 63, 64, 65, and eventually you're doing 100%. What used to be 100% days are your new 60% days. I hope that made sense.
Once you started, I was like, well, there goes my point.
Right.
No. Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this. If you're overwhelmed right now, make sure you schedule some self-care into your calendar and then tell whoever doesn't like it that Alan and Kevin said so, because we're all about that self-care and that self-love. We hope you enjoyed this. Up next, we are going to do a scratching the surface episode on something that Alan has been pestering me to do for a long time. Hyper-conscious leadership.
I totally have. Conscious leadership is one of my favorite topics ever. I just looked up hyper-conscious recently, and we already knew this, but it means acutely aware. So one of the biggest bottlenecks in our lives, I believe, all of us, and definitely me, is leadership. And I think this is going to be a good topic for everybody.
I cannot wait to chat about it, and it's hyper-conscious leadership, not just conscious leadership.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just making sure. All right, we'll talk to you then.
Talk to you soon.
Bye.